Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for your time. We're going to speak once again for 60 minutes tonight, and hopefully this will be an interesting topic. We're going to speak about a Russian scalar energy researcher. His name is Kazarev, Nikolai Kozyrev. Brilliant man. There are not many bona fide scalar energy researchers because most researchers have never worked with scalar energy. It's not their fault, they just don't realize it exists. Anyway, we'll speak about Kazarev and what he's accomplished, and it's just fantastic, and he deserves greater consideration, but that day will come eventually.
Nancy said that you give us a tour of your lab to show how you do stuff.
Yeah,
Is that possible?
I'm gonna show you the lab. I will show you the lab later. We'll try and wrap this up 10 minutes before the hour. When I work with people, I work with photographs. Again, let me just state our terms. This is my photograph. I actually place a photograph inside the instrument. So yes, all of our sessions are exclusively by way of photographs of people, animals, plants, etc. And when I'm working with people, I work with people as a group. So sometimes I'll have 10,000 photographs in one day, and I work with everybody simultaneously. So yes, it is really it's a group session. That's the best way to put it. And if you will, when you're working in a scalar energy paradigm, in a scalar energy time reference, that really calls to mind that we live in a holographic universe. So in other words, in a scalar energy universe, everything is interconnected. And that is the observation, and that is the rule of thumb when I'm working with people. I work with people as a group because we're all interconnected anyway. Now, in electromagnetic paradigm, no, we're separate entities, we're separate people. But in scalar energy, it's a unifying principle, and everybody is worked on simultaneously in a scalar energy paradigm. When I'm working with a scalar energy instrument, all of the action, once again, all of the action is upon a photograph. And what I have found, and what my predecessor, the inventor, has found, that a photograph is the exact body double, mind double, the actual spiritual double of a person. So put all of that together. When I'm working with my photograph, I can detect a disease, or I can detect a toxin or a pathogen. And working with that photograph, we're able to change the molecular structure found on that photograph. Now keep in mind, we never work with people in person. We always work with photographs. So there seems to be some congruence, some connection between a photograph and a person. But that's the actual premise of my work and the work of my predecessor. That working with a photograph, you're working with the energetic copy of a person. Let me repeat that. A photograph, any photograph, is the copy, is the light signature or the energetic signal of a person. So I think many of you on this call tonight realize we work with people remotely, and we do so by way of photographs. I work with myself likewise with a photograph. The instruments, and I'm going to show you the instruments later, the instruments are designed to work exclusively by way of photographs. So I will say this about the recent pandemic, that we've worked with thousands of people around the world. By way of their photograph, those people report that they feel well. Those people report that they're not in harm's way. So this is anecdotal, but it is revelatory. It is indeed significant that everybody who has submitted their photograph to us is reporting that they're in at least fair health, and that nobody has been admitted to the hospital while we have been working with them energetically by way of their photograph. Now, again, my predecessor was a man by the name of Galen Hieronymus, and he worked with photographs of astronauts while these astronauts were orbiting the moon. And during the Apollo mission, he could monitor the biorhythms, and he could monitor even disease conditions that these astronauts had. And he did it all by way of their photograph. Well, keep in mind that during this lunar mission, the astronauts were 270,000 miles away from the Earth. But nonetheless, Galen Hieronymus, the inventor, could pick up their signal. He could pick up their bioenergetic signal, and he did all of that by way of a photograph. So this is a new and emerging science. It is known as scalar energy science or scalar energy research. I consider myself to be one of the few researchers today, and not because it's deemed to be esoteric, but simply because it's an emerging science and people know so little about it. And it really has not yet been properly promulgated by the media or by the scientific community. So with that in mind, I'm going to get on to our discussion tonight. I want to speak to you again about a Russian astrophysicist, Nikolai Kozyrev, a brilliant man. And I'm going to share with you what this great man has done. Kazarev was able to measure scalar energy by way of a telescope. He had a scalar energy telescope. And in so doing, he was able to detect scalar energy emanations by way of this photograph. Now, what really is so incredible is when he was observing scalar energy by way of his telescope, a scalar energy telescope, he was picking up emanations from the moon. That is, he was able to measure on the moon, okay, a scalar energy, what I would consider signal or spectra on the moon. And he did it all by way of this telescope, this scalar energy telescope. And he was one of the first people ever to admit that the moon had volcanoes. So what is really incredible is that, well, back when he was researching, back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, we did not have that understanding of the moon. But he observed volcanoes on the moon, and he did it all by way of his keen observation, and a great deal of that observation was achieved by these scalar energy instruments. And in so doing, he was able to demonstrate that, yes, that there was lunar activity on the moon. Quite fascinating to me. Volcanic activity on the moon. And to this day, he's considered one of the first scientists who's ever been able to pick that out and to identify that phenomenon. Just fascinating to me, just absolutely fascinating to me. When Kazarev was able to take his telescope, and it really was a telescope that could pick up on what I would consider to be emanations from the stars. Okay, he noticed that even when he had the metal screen over.
Come on, girls.
Hello. Kazarev could even pick up star energy, stellar energy, even when a metal screen covered his telescope. Now, you cannot do that with electromagnetic energy. And it became apparent to Kazarev that his telescope was picking up emanations from the stars that were scalar energy emanations, that he could even pick up this spectral copy or some type of signal from a star when his telescope was covered with this metal screen. What does that mean? That means that the scalar energy from the stars passes through that metal container, that metal screen that covered his telescope. Well, you put that into motion, that's a sign that there's two energies, that there's electromagnetic energy that behaves in one specific fashion, and there is scalar energy that observes different principles. And this is what Kazarev was able to understand. Kazarev was able to realize that scalar energy was emanating from the stars of our universe, and that scalar energy was really the energy that powered the universe. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. So throughout his career, he devoted his life to understanding the quality of stars and the makeup of stars, the quality of what I want to say, this subtle essence, scalar energy. He went on to conclude that stars were powered by scalar energy. And I've always thought that. And he went on to state that every star was really a beacon, a power source of scalar energy. He did not agree with this thermonuclear description that scalar energy was just to be considered an esoteric energy. No, to the contrary, Kazarev said that scalar energy not only powered stars, but scalar energy really was the workforce behind the entire universe. And Kazarev discounted the notion that the center of a star was very hot, which I discount likewise. The center of any star is relatively cool. A star is powered by scalar energy. Now, if this is true, and I contend it is, if this is true, what does this mean for mankind? This means that we have found a way to describe the universe with this scalar energy paradigm. And if we can mimic a star, okay, if we can in some way go about and repeat this process, then we will be able to create miniature stars, which is a power source for everybody. Okay, I'm trying to bring up the
you got it. You got it now.
and Kazarev always, again, he looked at the stars and the sun, and he said that it doesn't make sense how the sun purportedly would be so hot, and that the sun would emanate so much energy, but there were so many contradictions. And that is, if the sun was so hot at its core, then outside of that core, the actual temperature of the sun will cool down and then once again heat up. So there's just too many contradictions. He looked at the sun and the stars and he said they did not observe the second law of thermodynamics. He looked at the sun and the stars and he said, well, if there were so many activity, thermonuclear activity, that the stars would give off a greater number of neutrinos, and they don't. Neutrinos are a neutral particle, and it's been shown that any thermonuclear activity produces really a great flood, a prodigious flood quantity of neutrinos. But under his observation, our sun was never broadcasting, our sun was never emitting this quantity of neutrinos. It just does not happen. So Kazarev, and I think he was one of the few scientists who's ever really grasped this, realizes that there are no thermonuclear activity. There is no thermonuclear dynamic inside the sun and the stars. Now, what does that mean? It means that most of what I would consider conventional physics is wrong. And what we're looking at is not a sun that's going to die out or the stars that are going to die out. To the contrary, the sun and the stars are perpetual because scalar energy is perpetual. And Kazarev was always looking for some outside force that would power the sun and the stars. And he agreed, and I agreed, that it's God. You know, what gives expression to the sun and the stars, and why after billions, supposedly billions of years, I don't think it's been that long, but if the universe has been around for billions of years, then why hasn't the sun and the stars burned out? Or why don't we see a greater sense of degradation in the sun and the stars? Well, it's kind of obvious to me because it's not electrical, it's not magnetic. The sun and the stars are not exhibiting electromagnetic behavior. Now, another thing that Kazarev discovered was that when he looked at the sun or the stars, he could observe time in motion. And he believed that time was essentially produced by scalar energy, that the movement of scalar energy was responsible for the movement of time. I have always considered that. So if scalar energy is a double helix, and if you can imagine a double helix rotating in one direction, that is how time moves forward, this rotation in one direction. When the scalar wave or the double helix reverses its motion, then time will reverse. Time will go back. So with this observation, Kozyrev was able to deduce, and I think he's correct, that time is really a function of scalar energy. So the cause of time is scalar energy. And he worked later in his life with actually subjecting various objects to what would be considered a time anomaly. And he found that certain objects would be transported in time to some extent. But a lot of his work still remains shrouded, and we don't quite understand the full import of his work. Now, Kazarev went on to develop these, what I call these scalar energy telescopes, and in so doing, these telescopes were able to detect the actual current position of a star. Now, consider this. Let's say a star is 10 light years away. In other words, it takes 10 years for that source of light to travel to the Earth. And if we're looking with a naked eye at that star, you're looking at the previous position of that star, which is not the current position. So if you consider that stars move, okay, and that the actual position of a star will not be in the location that you're looking at it with the naked eye. So Kazarev was able to train his telescope on the projected path of a star. And Kazarev and his team were able to receive scalar information or star energy from the future position of a star, And what does that mean to me? That a scalar energy instrument is able to ascertain the future, the true position of a star versus the visible position with our naked eye. So if we were to reproduce his work, we would have scalar energy telescopes, and we could see the actual position, the real position of stars in the universe, not the what I would consider previous position by way of an electromagnetic telescope. So quite candidly, our current telescopes show us the position of the stars years ago, because it takes years for that energy to reach planet Earth. However, a scalar energy telescope that Kazarev had shows the exact position of those stars. Now, if we were to, again, reproduce his work, this would catapult the science of astrophysics. This would catapult our understanding of the universe. But we have yet to catch up to him. We don't quite understand these scalar energy researchers and what they're trying to show us, what their science is showing to mankind. It's a new way of looking at the universe. Here's another example. Kazarev was able to pick up the emission of gas on the moon. Okay, and in so doing, that emission of gas showed that the moon was volcanically active. That we have a moon that at one time had volcanoes. Now, I don't know if those volcanoes are still active or not, but the Apollo 11 astronauts, when they went to the moon and they picked up stones, moon rocks, and they brought them home, well, many of those rocks showed that they were of a volcanic character. So at one time, there were volcanoes, and I'm sure they were active volcanoes on the moon. Well, this theory was put forth by Kozyrev back in the 40s and the 50s. And it was considered just way too far out of the box, but it's been proven true. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is really that we have to look at this emerging science, scalar energy, and it's another tool, okay? It will solve many problems. It will allow us to identify many phenomenon that we've never been able to identify, okay? When Kazarev was alive, he saw that scalar energy emitted from stars is billions of times faster than the speed of light. Some people call that superluminal. What does that mean? Well, it's beyond measurement. And I've always contended that a scalar energy is everywhere and that there's no time lag. So that if we are receiving scalar light, scalar energy from a star, it's an instantaneous communication. Now imagine that. There are some stars that are 1,000, 2,000, 1,000,000 light years away. And it might take 1,000,000 years for their source of light to reach the Earth. But if you're using one of Kazarev's telescope, you can hone into that star and you could receive scalar energy, a signal from that star 1,000,000 light years away. You can receive that signal instantaneously with a Kazarev telescope. And that's quite fascinating to me. So if we finally start using these gifts of men like Kazarev, and we've mentioned Tesla in the past, again, not only will this give us a greater, a more meaningful understanding of the universe, but then these instruments will allow us to achieve what we've never been able to achieve before. And you know, this, I've always said that a scalar energy philosophy, a scalar energy paradigm will offer so many solutions to mankind. We have so many problems in the world, and this technology will solve so many problems. So it's my hope that my work and that of other scalar energy researchers will someday be embraced as a means to solve our problems. That's the whole point of my research. Otherwise, frankly, I've wasted my life. Okay, Kazarev considered that scalar energy moved in a spiral fashion, and he's right. You can move in a straight line, people, but in so doing, you can move in a spiral fashion. Imagine a corkscrew. It moves forward in a forward direction, but it tunnels. It moves as a spiral. Well, that's what scalar energy is. Scalar energy is a spiraling. It's a tunneling, if you will. So any scalar wave is a double helix and it spins. It's spiraling energy. And that scalar energy is considered the primal force in the universe, and it serves to assemble and sustain the stars. So these are the key elements here that we have to look at, that what these great inventors, these great theorists have discovered, we have to hold on to this. We really have to embrace this. And with this knowledge, we're going to change the world. I've said many times that if the world were to accept and to embrace scalar energy, everything would change. The world would change. We would see the merit of these incredible instruments.
There is really not much on Kozyrev. You cannot really find much on the guy.
One of the problems that we have today, and it's a shame, Kazarev was incarcerated. He spent 10 years in a Russian gulag. You know, many people in the Russian government were intimidated by intellectuals, and he's an incredible man. But this is Kazarev with one of his telescopes. They were intimidated by them. And what was their solution? To put a lot of the intellectuals in jail, as well as other people. And actually, Solzhenitsyn wrote about Kazarev in one of his books, and gave him tribute. So this is a great Russian thinker, Kazarev. We give him credit, and he certainly has served to formulate my theories of the world and of the universe. And to this day, we're still trying to figure out exactly what he has accomplished. Here's another factoid. Kozyrev understood that the moon had a very weak magnetic field. And subsequently, that was proven by the lunar missions. Now, the way he could ascertain this is by way of observation. And for the most part, he realized that observing phenomenon by way of these scalar energy telescopes gave him an advantage. He could see things, he could understand many phenomenon by way of these scalar energy instruments that he could not understand and he could not comprehend, he could not observe by way of a typical electromagnetic telescope. So for that matter, Kazarev is one of the few scientists who has ever developed scalar energy instruments. In this case, they were scalar energy telescopes. And for that, he will someday receive his due reward as being probably the first man to develop scalar energy telescopes. Again, much of his work is shrouded in mystery. He spent 10 years in a Soviet concentration camp that really served to bifurcate his academic career. And had it not been for this Russian gulag imprisonment, as well as the suppression of information coming out of Russia, he could have been considered one of our greatest scientists today. But you know, what happened behind the Iron Curtain 50, 60, 70 years ago, we obviously, we just shudder. We shake our heads, and the inhumanity of all of it, it's been terrible. But that concludes my talk about Kozyrev tonight. I want to take a few questions, and then I'm going to take everybody to the laboratory, and then we're going to conclude with that. So, without further ado, do we have any questions, any comments from anybody regarding Kazarev or what we're doing in our laboratory and how scalar energy works? Kazarev could find a star in its original position. Now, if Kazarev can find a star billions, trillions of miles away from planet Earth, and he could identify a star by way of a scalar energy telescope, then my instrument can find a person by way of their photograph. Okay, you're obviously not a billion miles away, a trillion miles away as a star would be. So all of this calls to mind, you see the congruence now. A scalar energy telescope that Kazarev used could detect and could measure phenomenon on a sun, on a star, on our sun, and do it all by way of what? A photographic image, which is what? That's what you have by way of telescopic examination. Well, I don't use a telescope, but my instrument uses photographs, which is an image, okay? And with that image, I could ascertain our biorhythm. And we do that all by way of photographs. And what we have found is that this is action at a distance. What do I mean by that? That if Kazarev could interact with a star with his scalar energy telescope, that I can interact with people by way of their photograph. So the world is at our fingertips. So in other words, the universe came, so to speak, the universe came to Kazarev by his telescope. The world can come to me by way of photographs. Here's a collage from Africa. People around the world are sending us photographs. Here's a collage from Cameroon, Africa. I've never been to Cameroon, Africa, but I can make a connection with my instrument, okay, by way of this energetic force field. Now, and to this day, I'm kind of still flabbergasted why the world doesn't pick this up. Sandra and I knock our heads together. You know, a lot of times we just say, it's such a simple concept. If Kazarev could do that with a telescope, with stars, then we can do that with another scalar energy instrument with photographs. I think the audience gets that, and I won't belabor that point.
Okay, looks like Susie. Susie, open yourself up there, girl.
Yeah, I just want to know what form, you say that the scalar energy was revealed to him. was it just some kind of blob on his photograph, or what kind of, do we have any pictures or?
Again, Susie, great question, but this is what I understand. And keep in mind, he was behind the Iron Curtain. He was under the thumb of Russian communism. He was able to measure the spectral emission or the spectral character of stars. And by deciphering certain light signals, he was able to ascertain a certain type of gas or a certain type of element by way of spectral analysis.
Okay.
But what's really keen is this. He was able to see the future position of a star. I'm going to do my best. If this finger represents what we see right now of a star, which is 10 years old, so to speak. So the star is 10 light years from us. This finger represents the actual position of a star. So a typical conventional telescope will show a star in this position, which is 10 years ago, okay?
Mm-hmm.
A scalar energy instrument, a scalar energy telescope shows the star in this position, which is the actual position, which is fascinating. And no telescope today can show us the actual position of a star, because all telescopes show us the electromagnetic signal, which is the previous position of a star. Whereas Kazarev's telescope shows us the actual physical position, the actual placement of a star in the universe, okay? Because in a scalar energy paradigm, information is instantaneous. So any astronomer would just do a backflip over this. If they could have a Kazarev telescope that showed you the exact position of a star today.
Well, how would they even know where to look for it? I mean,
well, what Kazarev did, he would project, and almost by way of symmetry, he would project the future position of a star, and lo and behold, his telescope would pick up that energy, and he would say, yes, in 20 years, this star will be at that specific location by way of our naked eye. In other words, a Kazarev telescope would show the exact position of a star, and he could measure that star energy in the present moment. And he would say in 20 years, then by way of our naked eye examination, you'll see that star move across the universe. And in 20 years, our eye will see that position of the star in that current position. You follow me? Am I making that clear?
No, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in other words, well, in 10 years, it'll be where he saw it 10 years previously, and in 20 years, it'll be over there. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, however, how can he, I mean, sure, we can wait 10 years and then, verify that in 10 years. So, and then he's lived how long, and how, that's a long time to wait to verify that.
Well, of course. And he actually, his academic career was cut short. But the point I'm trying to make is, again, and I'm going to do my best, if this finger represents the current position of a star that we see with the naked eye, the real position of that star might be at this position. And the difference is a 20-year migration, a 20-year movement to the actual position of the star. The star is actually here, but our naked eye sees it at this location. Why? Yeah. Because it took 20 years.
And I get that. I just don't know why they.
In other words, and no pun intended, sometimes I say, why would you read a newspaper that's 20 years old? Why would you want to look at a star in which the information you're receiving from that star is 20 years old? Would you not prefer to view a star in the present moment? Now, all telescopes today are electromagnetic telescopes, as far as I understand. So we're looking at the star information that sometimes is 10, 20, 30 years old. If a star is 10 light years away, you're getting information 10 years ago from that star. If you had a Kazarev telescope, you would look at the universe in the present moment. Now, what does that mean? Let's say a supernova exploded 1,000 years ago, but it's going to take 1,000 years for that energy from the supernova to reach the Earth. Okay. Well, Kazarev could take a Kazarev telescope and he could tell us where the supernova is, and to anticipate that solar radiation, because he could ascertain the current state of the universe. Now, what does this mean? We're looking into the future, people. With the Kazarev telescope, you're looking into future activity of the universe. Okay? In other words, if it takes, for instance, if a star had a massive explosion 10 years ago, and it's going to take 10 years to feel that energy, well, a Kazarev telescope could say, well, the star did explode, and it is emanating right now, but a Kazarev telescope could pick up that stellar activity in the present moment. So again, what's the point here? A Kazarev telescope is going to tell you the future of the universe today. If you're an astronomer, don't you want to know the future of the universe today? I would. It's a profound thought. Consider what I'm saying. We had a lot of people on chat.
Yeah, and I'm just, you can answer this one if you want to, Tom. Jill is asking about autoimmunity. Do we have a specific program to address autoimmune conditions? And I just started to type.
An autoimmune disease, here's one definition: when the body cannot distinguish between self and non-self. Why does the body attack itself? That's what happens with many autoimmune diseases. In some respect, I think that's an informational disease. Why does the body inform the body to attack itself? Okay, it's suicidal, so to speak. It's biological suicide. I don't have an answer for that. I only can hope that a chakra balancing will recalibrate the body not to attack itself. And I saw a question about Parkinson's, and let me just make a general statement. Now, in part, this is not conclusive, but in part, many neurological diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, is exacerbated, or at least in some way initiated by germs, pathogens in the brain, pathogens that pass the blood-brain barrier. I read years ago, and I've always considered this theory, that many people with Alzheimer's have the herpes virus in their brain. What does that mean? The herpes virus is neuroinvasive. It goes after the neurons in our brain, and it breaks down nerve cells in our brain. Okay? And it attacks the brain cell. And this is why many autopsies have been performed on people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and they find an abundance of pathogens and spirochetes, viruses and spirochetes inside the brain. There is a clear link. I promised everybody I would show the lab. And again, we try and wrap this up within 60 minutes. So at the top of the hour, we'll just bid everybody a good night. I only eat 2 meals a day because I am on natural foods and I'm not hungry. So I actually take photographs of food and I place it in the instrument. And the instrument then is downloading or recreating food, and I'm under the influence of natural foods for 24 hours a day. So I'm getting carrot energy, so to speak, 24 hours a day. And that subdues my appetite. That also serves to add or create phytochemicals around the clock, plant chemicals. And I've always said that the phytochemicals found in the natural foods program is probably perfect nutrition, because it's of nature and I'm delivering it by way of nature. So natural foods is a 100% natural foods program delivered by energy, not by chemicals, and it serves to provide the nutritional needs that we demand, that we are looking for. And I consider it to be my best approach to nutrition. And I will say it has suppressed my appetite.
When you have, okay, I saw in the collage there was at least a little space between each picture, so there's some separation, even though it's 1,000 photos. What's the most, side question, what's the most amount of photos you can do in one One zap. You zap it, sort of. Or you can't say that.
No, I'll say it. I would say if we miniaturize photographs, we could probably fit 100 million photographs in the instrument.
Wow, even miniaturized with the digital pixels being small,
yes.
you don't lose that information?
No, you
wow,
don't.
That's cool. And then the other thing is, okay, so you got the pictures getting, you got all these people getting a session, and the session has a whole probably collage. I guess you collage all the nutrients, right? And then you zap the collage to all the people.
Yay!
Like one collage to the next collage, right?
Yeah. I could assemble 1,000, 2,000 collages in the instrument. If there's 1,000 people on this collage, and I had 1,000 other collages like this, 1,000 times 1,000 is 1,000,000 people. Do you see what this means to mankind? And you understand why this technology is such a game changer. You know?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to my lab.
Okay,
when I'm in the scalar energy laboratory, the signal is so strong it overrides my computer. So I'm showing you some of the instruments.
Oh, we got a good view here. Oops.
Okay. Now, if I come and go, it's because the scalar energy interferes with the computer. Okay? So if you cannot hear me, let me know. Okay. So, really quickly, the instrument at the bottom is endorphins and neurotransmitters. The second from the bottom is a standardized session. Natural foods is above. And at the very top is mineral and precious stones. Then I move over to this instrument. We call this the ARC. This is the instrument that we can detect pathogens and toxins, and we can eradicate the molecular structure of pathogens and toxins. The instrument in the back is fat metabolism, and then these instruments here are digestive enzymes and hormone therapy. And again, these are some of the instruments. This is not the sum total, but these are some of the instruments that I work with.
Sure. No, okay. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah. And again, this laboratory, in a day, we could easily work with 100 million photographs. Okay? So this is very real. This has been my life work. And once the world will grasp this and appreciate what we can do with these instruments, now, to this day, I'm flabbergasted that the world doesn't get it. But there is suppression. My research is suppressed.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to be back next Thursday. I appreciate everybody's time.
So basically, to recap, you just have a collage of nutrients that you put into one machine, and it projects it to a collage of faces in another machine?
Exactly.
Okay.
I have photographs of natural foods, and I project that energy from natural foods into photographs of people.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. That
everything is done by way of photographs. And what's the key behind that? The key is when I'm working with photographs, there's no guesswork. Okay? There's no human interpretation. A photograph is a representation of nature. And that's why the work is perfect. All right, I'm going to sign off for tonight. We'll see you next Thursday night. You've been a great audience. Thank you all. Sandra, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everybody.